Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here once again on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways Dorion and then subsequently Kinghorn Subdivision. We are in the community of Red Rock, Ontario. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be working our way right from this point here, right where we left off on a previous hike. So the roadway that you see in front of us is Highway 628, which is the highway or the road that runs into the community of Red Rock, which is just over there. All right, there's a bridge and it just starts on, I guess technically starts over just on the other side of the bridge. This is all considered part of Red Rock anyway. You can see the grade here where it crosses the highway. I don't know if you can actually notice that there is a patch. You can see there's a darker patch on the road up there. That's where the crossing for the railway would have been across the road. Luna, come here. And so we previously did this section last spring, so in the spring of 2021. This is actually a redo, so we've done this section before. We were here in September of 2020, and so we're redoing this because there's a lot of new information to talk about, a lot of new things to explore. Right now, today is the 30th of October. Kind of our we were supposed to be done hiking for the year, but it's been so beautiful lately that I thought I'd take advantage of it. It's a little too sunny out. It's very, very bright. You can see it's a clear blue sky, which does create some problems with shadows and things like that, and we'll see how this turns out. So right here, right where we are here, would have been the location of the station here at Red Rock. So just to give you a little background information, so Red Rock was not an original station on the line. There was a stop that was proposed here when the railway line was being built called Crawford, but it never did sort of come to fruition. Basically, you had a station to the north, which was a major station on the line, which was Nipigon. The next station that we're actually going to be working towards is Robford, which is a couple of miles to the west. So Red Rock was not here. Now, the station at Red Rock was created because in the 1930s, construction began on a paper mill here in the community, which would become Red Rock. And so obviously they needed a station here. So just across the road, and we explored that in the previous episode, there was basically a series of rail lines that were used for storage from the cars that were bringing or cars full of paper from the paper mill. So the station was actually located right here. So Red Rock was created as a station in 1937. What I'll do is I'll flash up the 1937 timetable so you can see the creation of the station on there. So again, the station would have been right in this spot here. If you click on the link in the description and you go to my page on Red Rock, you'll actually be able to see a photograph of the station here and see what it looked like. If you also go to click on the link in the description, you'll actually be able to see a 2009 Google Street View image of this area, and you'll be able to see the rails still in place. You'll be able to see the rails crossing the road, the rails working their way this way to the west. You'll be able to see the station board for Red Rock, which was right in this area here, and you'll also be able to see a signal that was up here just ahead, just in that area over there, and basically the signal was for an interlock. So just across the road, and again, we explored that in the previous episode, and you'll be able to check that out. Basically, there was a spot where the Canadian Pacific had a spur that crossed the Kinghorn, and basically that spur allowed Canadian Pacific to access the paper mill as well, and there was a signaling that was associated with that interlock. Now the Kinghorn was not signaled, it was a secondary line, so it's considered to be dark territory, as the term goes. And but there were a series of signals. So there was one right in this area here, basically to halt the trains right before they reach the interlock. And as we're going to see, there's a one about a mile west, and it was the same situation on the other side. There was a signal right before the interlock, and then there was one further up. So just to give you an idea where we are, we do have a culvert that's passing under the grade here. The mileage on the culvert is 132.21. That is the mileage on the Kinghorn. The original lines, the mileage was slightly different. The Kinghorn started in Long Lac, whereas the original line started in Jellicoe. So for the original lines, we have to subtract 49.7 miles. And so basically, the original mileage would have been 82.51. So 82.51. So we're just going to walk a little bit further here, because somewhere in this area, again, there was a signal, and you see that in that 2009 Google Street View image. So again, it was somewhere around here. Down here, kind of interesting, we do have a white timber, and I wasn't quite sure what these white timbers were for. I think I figured it out. I think these white timbers in the old days, because I've seen a picture with a sign on it. So I think these white timbers were used in the old days for these signboards. So this could have been the one showing that you've arrived in Red Rock. So this could have very well been that could have been it. And I think it was attached right there. You can see there's a bottom end of a post. So it would have come off right there, right under this very large tree here. Okay, so let's hop on the bike. So again, the signal, I've looked before. I don't see any remnants of it. The signal would have been right in this location here. And there's nothing to be found of it. You can see there's a whole bunch of ballast here in this spot here. Again, I'm just trying to go off of that Street View image. And unfortunately, Mother Nature doesn't take very long to reclaim what is hers. So again, it had to have been somewhere right over there. Okay, so while we have a second here, we can start our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental line. The Canadian Northern Railway Company got its start in Manitoba way back in 1896, buying up a bunch of charters and things like that. Their first big project was the construction of a line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, which is just to the west of us, to Winnipeg, and that line was constructed between 1899 and 1902. So shortly thereafter, Canadian Northern began constructing all kinds of lines throughout the prairies, particularly in the northern part of the prairies, which at the time was very much underserved, and Canadian Northern became sort of very synonymous with the northern prairies, and sort of servicing that area. As well, they also began constructing lines north from Toronto and acquiring, buying up other lines and charters and things like that. So eventually they reached into the Sudbury area. Sorry, just doing a check here. And so around that time, Canadian Northern realized that in order for their company to be successful long-term, they would need a transcontinental line. The only problem was Canadian Northern was not particularly keen on building the line between the end of steel in Sudbury, which was located at Ruel, and Port Arthur, because the line was going to be very difficult to build and therefore very expensive. And you can see some of the geographical challenges that they faced here. So the community of Red Rock gets its name from the red rock, which you'll see exposed in places with these very high ridges that are around here. The geological term is called cuesta, and the rock here is part of a geological formation called the Sibley Group. It's very high in iron content, so it has a very bright red color to it, and I'm guessing the term was developed by the indigenous people that once lived here, and I'm sure they probably called it Red Rock, and that's where the name kind of spun out of. Okay, so we have to pause our story here for a second because we actually have a feature. I don't know if you can see it. I can see it from where I am. The camera's a little bit more wide angled, but we actually have the remains of a rail line just above us. So in 1937, when the mill here in Red Rock was opened, obviously Canadian National built a spur down to there, but Canadian Pacific wanted to build a spur as well. What they did was originally, so the newer spur was on the west side of the highway, sorry, the east side of the highway. Again, we explored that in previous episodes. So the original line branched off from the Canadian Pacific just over here and basically ran here, and essentially they built kind of a trestle that crossed over the Canadian National line and then crossed over Big Trout Creek here. You can actually see, I don't know if you can see in the camera again, might be a lot of glare. You can see the piles that are in the river there. There actually is a culvert right here, and the mileage on the culvert, let's take a look here, because otherwise I'm gonna have to go jump in the bush and take a look at it. I got it marked on my GPS. So the mileage is 132.37. So again, that's the mileage on the Kinghorn. The original lines, that would have been 82.67. So let's go explore this spur. Okay, so we've made our way up here on the grade. You can see the remains of the old Canadian Pacific spur here that runs into the mill at Red Rock. So you can see it's a little tough going this way because we're going right into the sun, but you can see sort of a very well defined elevated grade here. And then over here is the beginning of the trestle that would have carried it across first the Canadian National tracks and then over the Trout Creek. So if we work our way down over here, you can actually see the remains. So here you can see there's an old piece of what appears to be a pile. And here you can see the remains of the northern abutment. So you can see these massive piles that have been driven into the ground. You can see the sawn lumber to kind of reinforce the grade here. Here you can see these very large metal pins that have been inserted into the timbers here, into the piles. There's another one right here. And so again, I do apologize because we're going right into the sun, but it would have made its way right across through here. And I'm pretty sure I saw some stuff here. Yeah, there's the remains of a pile right here. There's one right there, and there's one right there. And again, you can see kind of this sort of piece of the structure here. So you can kind of see how the earth has been moved in this area, again looking back to the abutment and then working its way back this way. Here's another, nope, that's a stump. Thought for a second there we had a pile. Gets kind of grown in through here. Here's more piles right here, there, and right under here. And I think I threw this one on top of one here. And then here and here. And again, it would have worked its way this way. And then across the Canadian National grade. And over here, let's drop my bag. Because, yep, down here, you can see some piles where it crossed the river. So you can see all these massive piles here that formed this northern bent over the river. I can see some stuff over there on the southern bank, and then you can kind of see there's a little hump there, and that would have been the grade going that way into Red Rock. Okay, so let's hop back up on the grade here and continue our journey west. Okay, so let's continue our story here. So Canadian Northern did not want to build a line between Sudbury and Port Arthur. Eventually they were forced to do so. They tried setting up all kinds of agreements, in particular getting a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific. That didn't pan out, and so they were forced to build. So again, construction lasted from 1911 to 1914. So on New Year's Day 1914, the last spike was driven, and the line opened for traffic in 1950. Now, unfortunately, Canadian Northern's fate did not play out very well. Soon after the line opened, the company began running into financial difficulties, and basically that stemmed from a couple of things. So first of all, exorbitant construction costs. So for example, building this line, building through the mountains of the British Columbia, had created a lot of financial issues. Financial pressure of World War I created problems, and so by 1917 the company was basically bankrupt and had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And a year later, the Canadian government merged, amalgamated, whatever descriptor that you want to use, Canadian Northern with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines called the Canadian Government Railways. And that merger produced Canadian National Railways. And the nationalization process took about 5 years to complete, because there's a lot of legislation, and as well they were trying to bring the Grand Trunk lines into the fold as well. And so the process was complete in 1923. So in 1923, the name of this line changed. It had originally been the Nipigon Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway, and eventually the name changed to the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways, and it remained as the Dorion Subdivision until 1960, when there was a major reorganization at CN. They adopted their modern logo. They rejiggled a whole bunch of lines, including this one. So what they did was they merged the Dorion subdivision with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision, and that created one line all the way from Long Lac to, at the time, Port Arthur, and continued to operate until 2005, when Canadian National decided to discontinue service on the line. And beginning in 2008, they began pulling up the rails, and that process was complete by 2010. So basically, again, we're straddling this creek, we're going parallel to this creek, the Big Trout Creek, or the North Trout Creek. Lots of little culverts that are going into the creek. So here we have one, and you can actually see some of the deterioration that's happening with the railway line. So, and you're going to see some more just up ahead, where basically the grade itself is just kind of sinking into where these culverts are, and you're going to see that just up ahead. So let's finally jump on the bike here and get going. So just up ahead here, you're going to see a whole pile of culverts. Unfortunately, pretty much all of them there's no mileage to be seen on them. It's basically all illegible. The grade here, you can see, is very, very well traveled. It's been pounded pretty flat. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hold up here, and then we're going to continue our journey.